So to start off this project, we need to grid our large paper. You're going to line a ruler up with the side of your page, and you're going to make a mark at every 2 inches. So we're making a small mark at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. So when you're making these marks, you want to use very light pressure. You don't want to be able to see these marks through the page. They will end up being erased once we're done with our drawing. I made them at the top of the page, and now I'm going to move my ruler to the bottom of the page, and I'm going to make those same marks again. So I am going to be making a very light mark at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. So what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to move my ruler to line those marks up, and I'm going to draw a straight line to connect them together. This is going to be a vertical line that connects the mark that I made at the top to the mark I made at the bottom. This is the first section of our grid. You need to make sure that when you're making your grid, again, you're using very light pressure, and you need to make sure that they're lining up. If it does not look like it's lining up, you need to start over, you need to try again, you need to ask someone else for help, or you need to ask the teacher for help. You need to make sure that you're doing this part right so that your drawing can be correct when we move on to the next steps. Now that I've made my marks vertically, I'm going to make them horizontally. I'm lining up my ruler with one of the vertical lines that I made, making sure that it's touching at the top, and I'm making a mark at every 2 inches again. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Doing it on the left-hand side, moving my ruler to the right-hand side, making those same marks again, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yes, just 10 because the paper is 12 inches long. And then I'm going to connect them just like we did with our vertical lines. So let's just make sure that we have different sections of our paper that we can use to transfer from. We did it at every 2 inches just so that everything can be consistent and convenient. We want to make sure that these lines are straight. We want to make sure that they are 2 inches across. Again, if something looks wrong, you need to ask for help. We need to figure out something that's wrong, because if you get this part incorrect now, it's going to cause you a lot of trouble when you go and try to transfer your drawing. So now that our big paper is gridded, now we're going to grid our tiny one. We're going to line up our ruler with the image itself and make a mark at every inch. The pressure that you use on this doesn't really matter. Honestly, it might be better to use heavier pressure just so you can make sure that you actually see your line. Just like before, I'm making my marks at the top of the image, moving my ruler to the bottom of the image, and I'm making more marks at every single inch. We're making a 1 inch by 1 inch grid on our image. Now, your image might not be exactly 8 inches, but you can still make those lines and you can still make it 8 inches long. You will just have to make up whatever drawing that you have on the outside. Just like before, we're going to be connecting our 1 inch lines to make sure that we have those vertical lines in place and to make sure that the vertical lines are 1 inch apart. Again, if something is wrong, you need to double check, figure out how to make it right. You need to make sure that your lines are lining up with one another. You need to make sure that they're perfectly vertical, that they aren't skewed, that they aren't accidentally diagonal. If you need to have another copy printed off, if you drew your lines too dark, if you can't see them, or if it is too messed up, that's also an option. You just need to make sure that you're doing these steps right, or else you will have a really hard time transferring your image later. So now that all of my lines are drawn vertically, I need to add in my horizontal lines. I'm lining up my ruler with the top of my image, and I'm making a mark at every single inch. Even if it might go below the image itself, I need to make sure that I have 8 sections across and 6 sections down so that we can accurately transfer our image onto our larger paper. Just like before, you make the marks on the left, switch your ruler over, and then make your marks on the right, line them up, This is the process that we've been through before on our larger paper. So now that our paper is gridded, we're ready to transfer our grid. Every section lines up. So we drew our image at 1 inch and our paper at 2 inches grid. That will make sure that the image transfers correctly, because if we just doubled the size of our image, it would be the size of the paper that we have in front of us. What you're going to do is you're going to go square by square and draw what is in each square. So you can see that I have some leaves in my second square on the top row, and I'm blocking them in. I'm seeing where it hits on the certain lines. I'm seeing where the object itself interacts with the lines. I'm just making sure that everything that is in that one square on the grid in my image also fills up that same square on the grid that is on my paper. You're going to be going square by square and you're going to be drawing it in. One thing that might actually help you is if you flip your paper over so that you can't associate your image with that object anymore. So you'll still be filling it in square to square, but you won't see it as I chose a butterfly. You won't see it as a butterfly anymore. I will just see it as a bunch of lines and a bunch of shapes, because that's really what an image is. It's just a bunch of lines and shapes organized to make something. If you can disassociate from what the object actually is, it might help you. So if you are struggling with gridding, if you're struggling from going square to square to transfer an image over from your paper, try flipping it. Try turning it around. Another thing that might help is if you label your transfer, your grids. And I have an example of that on the PowerPoint so you can see what that would look like. But that might help you. It would be something like battleship. So it would be like in section 1A, we have this part of a leaf. In section 2A, oh, the leaf continues, so on and so forth. So make sure that you check that out for some tips too. So gridding an image is very nice because it helps us with accuracy. So that's why it's an important tool for us to learn growing as artists. So make sure that you're filling in all the details and that you're filling in all the sections, and also making sure that your gridding transfer is accurate. We are looking for accuracy here, and we're looking for realistic drawings. So we have our main object as an animal, or bug or insect or whatever. So I chose a butterfly. There are some sections of my image that I don't particularly like, so I can make up the background for it. So you'll see future in my drawing that I'm going to be drawing leaves that might not be on my image, just because I would rather it fill up with leaves, something of substance, than something that's not really there. So that will be an artistic choice that you'll make independently. You cannot just leave the space blank. The space around your object needs to be filled up with something. Something needs to be there, whether it's the drawing itself or whether it is something that you create in its environment. I do want you to follow the image as closely as possible, and any alterations you might make to your image, double check with me first before you make them. So at this point, I have as many details in my drawing as I would like, so I'm going to go in with a kneaded eraser and I'm going to be erasing my grid. So we don't want to be able to see our grid through our watercolor drawing. That was just there to help us transfer our image. That's not something that we want to be a part of our final composition. Using a kneaded eraser helps you pick up the graphite easier than you would with a normal pen. So what I'm doing now is, now that my grid lines are gone, my image is drawn, I'm adding in those random lines that we want to see throughout our paper. You want to make sure that they are randomly, naturally just flowing across our page, kind of like we did with the neurographical drawings. And we want them to be overlapping one another, going over certain details, filling a majority of the page. There are a few things you want to avoid. You don't want them to go over an area of high detail because you're going to have a hard enough time filling in that section with detail anyway. You don't want to overcomplicate that by adding more lines on top. You don't want your lines to be too close together, so you just have very tiny segments throughout the entire thing, and you don't want them to be too far apart either, so that you just have large amounts of space just filled up by a plain block of color. We want these to have a variety. We want it to break up the composition. We want it to be free and flowing. If you want to move around your lines to match your composition like we saw in our examples, you can do that too. You can make them look like waves. You can take creative freedom with this. I just want you to be trying your hardest to arrange the line so that it makes sense according to your composition. If you have a hard time with that, please just ask for help. That's what I'm here to do, is I'm here to help you. So make sure that you have lines going vertically and horizontally across your page like you see in the image that I have up on the screen right now.